These are the lovely Bardini Gardens. They're named after Stefano Bardini, who was a late 19th century antiquarian and art collector, quite important in the history of Florence in this period. And he owned these gardens in the later 19th century, lucky man. He's also often nicknamed the Prince of Antiquarians. Bardini had an impact on the organisation and layout of these gardens, but their story actually goes back much further, and we'll be tracing that story as we wander around the gardens. I think one of the most distinguishing features about the Bardini Gardens, though, is the way that they dialogue with the views over the city. So you get this lovely conversation between verdure and nature and architecture in the valley below. And of course, you get some ravishing views of the Duomo with Brunelleschi's dome, really the focal point. And the garden often frames the dome through archways or pergolas or beautiful cascading leaves of trees and so on and so forth. So you see Florence really as a series of painted images. And then the views sweep across the city rooftops. In the foreground area here, you can see mainly residential area. You can see houses with lovely loggias or terraces that look over the gardens. And this area is the San Niccolò area, a popular residential area. But then looking beyond, in the further distance, you can see the saddle-shaped hill of Fiesole. Fiesole was actually the first civilized area in this part of the Arno Valley. It was an ancient Etruscan settlement, one of the great Etruscan cities. It was called Vipsal and is of course of much greater antiquity than Florence itself. So lovely views across to Fiesole. Coming down, you can see the side of the fine Gothic church of Santa Croce, with its distinctive spired bell tower. And then you can see the hills recede over into the distance there. We can see the foothills of the Apennines. So this is one of the viewpoints from the Bardini Gardens. Now, the gardens are built on quite a steep slope on the south side of the River Arno. And of course, the land is terraced. Beautiful grassy terraces, many of them edged, as you can see here, with beautiful roses, which in the springtime, in May and into June, are in full bloom and looking absolutely gorgeous. Well, the gardens are actually laid out in 3 different areas, so we can wander around and explore those different areas. Well, adjoining the orchards and the vineyard area, you can see here the more formal gardens. These were laid out by the Mozzi family, again, the original owners, in the 17th century. So this area is sort of baroque gardens, essentially. And at that period, they installed this sweeping staircase that rises up, a very theatrical effect, isn't it? Edged with vases, obelisks, stone statues, all the stuff of a lovely baroque garden. Today, the terraces are grassed and edged with roses that are in full bloom at this time of year. You can also see on either side of the stone staircase the irises, giagioli in Tuscan. And the iris, the giagiolo, is the emblem of Florence. It's a very important flower in the history of Florence. It was stylized to form the symbol of the city, looking a little bit like the fleur-de-lis. And the giagioli bloom wild in the spring across the hillsides. You can see them clambering over old stone walls. You can see them in overgrown vineyards. But they were also introduced into formal Italian gardens, and they make a very splendid sight with the leaves opening out to these sort of chivalric plumes, I would say, in various colours: white, blue, purple, even yellow, and they bloom at different times of year. The flower is actually connected to an ancient Greek legend, the legend of Iris, the rainbow goddess, messenger of the gods, who, when she descended from the sky to earth, Wherever her feet touched the ground, these iridescent flowers sprung up in all the colours of the rainbow. Although Stefano Bardini bought the gardens, as I said, in 1913, their history goes far further back to a family called the Mozzi family. The Mozzi family were a very, very wealthy family who originally owned this land, which stretches all the way up from the river, up the hillside, to the old city walls. And when the Mozzi family owned it, the gardens were functional gardens. They were a sort of hortus conclusus, an enclosed garden with the walls providing the enclosure, very much in the medieval tradition. And of course, the hortus conclusus would be used to grow fruits and vegetables and vines and so on. So this part of the garden, which is towards the bottom of the hillside, so quite near where the Mozzi had their palace, near the river, you can still see it evokes that original sort of hortus conclusus. You can see there's a fairly natural area just behind me here with long grass, with fruit trees. You can then see further up and running across the terrace here, again, the idea of fruit orchards, but also vines. Certainly the Mozzi had vines, espaliered vines would have been grown here. Lovely exposure to the sun, of course, so they could have made some pretty good wine, I should think. We know that the Mozzi, they owned it for several generations actually, down the centuries. And obviously, as tastes change, they introduce fashionable features in the 16th and 17th centuries. For instance, you can see these rather picturesque sort of resting points. There's a large niche here with a bench with mosaics around, evoking somewhat the idea of an ancient Roman grotto. And you can see around there were placed ornamental vases that no doubt would have been overflowing with flowers. So these make for nice little resting spots. And from such niches, of course, you get different vantage points over the city, or if you prefer, over these lovely sort of natural gardens where nature is left really free to roam. So from the formal gardens, you can see there's a pathway that runs up the hillside and takes us to perhaps the most defining feature of these gardens, the wisteria covered pergola. It's also possible to approach the pergola from the top terrace and come down the hillside, and you can exit at the bottom of the hill. So if you prefer to walk downwards, that is perfectly feasible. But let's wander on up the hill. This is the Wisteria pergola, some 70 metres long, and if you come here in late April, early May, you'll see it smothered in these beautiful blue blooms, and the perfume is absolutely overwhelming, really a sight to behold. But even if you come later in the year, I'm here in late May, there are flowering hydrangeas here you can see that cover the pergola with their delicate white flowers. They look a little like fountains. And everywhere the pergola opens up onto vistas of the city. There's a wonderful view of the Duomo here, framed by the hydrangeas, Palazzo Vecchio, the hills beyond. Well, the pergola itself was installed here in 2005. It's quite recent, but of course wisteria is an ancient plant. It came originally from Asia. Legend has it that Marco Polo brought the seeds of the wisteria into Italy. There's also another Italian legend that tells of a young shepherdess called Glicine. Glicine is the Italian word for wisteria. And it's said that this shepherdess was weeping profuse tears because she thought she wasn't beautiful. And those tears transformed into the beautiful cascading flowers of the wisteria plant, Glicine. Well, the walk up the Wisteria pergola brings you to this terrace where there is a coffee house, a cafe today. It was really created in its current design by Stefano Bardini in the early 20th century. Bardini actually bought from Pisa this loggia. You can see the stone columned loggia. It's really very beautiful. And he installed it here, joining together the two smaller buildings that the Mozzi family had had here previously. And of course, the loggia is not only a delightful place for coffee today or lunch or a cocktail in the evening, but it offers these ravishing views across the city of Florence. Well, from this belvedere with the loggia, we can wander over in this direction towards the third area of the gardens that I mentioned earlier. It is one of the interesting aspects of the Bardini Gardens, actually, that they really reflect very different layers of history, of garden design, of tastes. So really accretions over centuries that all come together in a very harmonious garden composition, I think. I mentioned that originally this was a hortus conclusus when the Mozzi family created the gardens, and the top boundary was in fact defined by the medieval city walls. So we can see those just up there. Of course, the hortus conclusus, an enclosed garden, was a symbolic space. It was really meant to represent the purity of the Virgin Mary, her enclosed womb. So medieval gardens had these symbolic overtones. And just below the old medieval walls, we come into this lovely copse area where you see thickets of trees. It's beautifully shady and cool, especially in the warmer months of the year. It's quite a paradise here, and a haven for birds. You can hear birdsong all around us. Well, this is the so-called English garden. It's the third of the three areas of these lovely Bardini gardens. And essentially it reflects the vogue that was popular, certainly in the Romantic period and the later 19th century too, of recreating the more sort of natural style of English Romantic gardens. Edging the woodland area, you can see here a fountain and a curvaceous little canal. It's called the Dragon Canal, and actually it was deliberately intended to introduce a touch of exotica into the English gardens. And it snakes through the woodland and then opens onto a very lush green lawn area. It also adds that very important element in garden design, the sound of running water. And this is something that, together with the bird song, creates the most beautiful natural music. You can see today that the pond is filled with exotic fish as well, the koi fish here, with their vibrant colours really adding a touch of exotica. Well, this very picturesque path curls down from the Dragon Canal and the lawn where we just were through the woodland here. It's so green. There are myriad shades of green. I feel as if I've stepped into a Monet painting. And then here, quite near the entrance to the gardens, again we have some beautiful rose plantings looking at their best at this time of year. And we come down and we reach the villa. This is Villa Bardini. We can take a closer look. You'll see that it boasts one of the finest views, I think, of any villa in Florence. Just in front of the villa there's a lovely lawned area, and set very scenographically at the end of it there is a statue of Venus. It was put there by Stefano Bardini, and it says if Venus has just emerged from bathing. Well, the word paradise comes from an ancient Persian word, paradiesa. And paradiesa was the term for an enclosed garden. And the idyllic Persian gardens should have had walls, just as we have here, shade from the heat of the sun, lush greenery, and the sound of running water. All these things come together in the Bardini Gardens, so I think we can say it really is a little paradise.